All right, everybody, this is the Horn Takes podcast. You're very rough around the edges. Texas sports talk destination. I'm your host, Sean Redfern. It's Prediction Friday. And I think the best thing about this Prediction Friday is it's just freaking Friday, man. The weather's starting to cool off a little bit here in Texas. Feels great outside right now. Felt great Saturday morning at the Red River Shootout. We don't have a Texas game to predict, but we're 8 days away, just a mere 8 days away from Texas getting another shot to get back on the field, get that Red River Shootout off their backs, and get back in the win column. We'll do our Trace Otra games today. That's 3 other games, and those are the 3 games that we're interested in besides the Texas game every week. And then we'll talk about the second half of the season a little bit for the Texas Longhorns. And we'll probably build on that and do a little bit of this on Monday, a little bit of this on Tuesday, because we don't have a game to break down, don't have a game to exaggerate about, don't have a game to look at the statistics for. So we'll probably continue talking, Texas mid-season, where they're at, where they need to get to, what are the keys going forward, all that good stuff. Check us out on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Horn Takes. Please follow and subscribe. Won't cost you anything on either one of those platforms. Help me out. Listen to the podcast at horntakespodcast.buzzsprout.com or anywhere you listen to podcasts. We're a little early this morning. Usually do this at 12. Had to make a schedule adjustment for 11:30. No big deal. Trace Otra games, week 7. There's some good games this week, y'all. Number 8, Oregon at number 7, Washington. This one kicks at 2:30 Central Time on ABC. The original line was Washington 3.5. It's fallen down to 3 now. So Washington's a 3-point favorite as of right now, or as of this morning. I think this could be a big game with some playoff implications. We talked about the Red River Shootout last weekend with Texas and Oklahoma, maybe having some playoff implications. I certainly think you got 2 undefeated teams here. I think a lot of people are really high on the Pac. They might get 2 teams in, they think. Some people think. I'm not sure about that. Got a real nice QB duel going on with Michael Penix and Bo Nix. Penix is number 1 in the country in yards per game at 399 yards per game. That is obscene. There are plenty of quarterbacks that have not thrown for 399 yards in a single game this year. And Penix averages that per game. Bo Nix, number 14 in yards per game with 291. We had a lot of guys early on this season as the season started to progress. We got into week 2, into week 3. A lot of guys really high on Washington. A lot of national type guys. I mean, I think I saw Joel Klatt one time mentioning he thought Washington was the most complete team in the country. At some point this season, Washington was showing up number 1 in some of these guys' polls. I was looking at their schedule. I'm kind of surprised there's so much love, and it's kind of died off the last few weeks. They haven't really played anybody, Washington. And they've pretty much taken care of business with exception of the Arizona game. Maybe I'm confusing them with USC. Can't remember. One of their more recent games for Washington it was a 7-point game, I believe. Oregon's been absolutely skull-dragging everybody, except for they had one close game on the road at Texas Tech in week 2. It'll be kind of interesting to see. I think we'll get a gauge of whether that game was maybe Oregon's not as good as we thought they were, or Or is it just the case of they showed up on one of those fluky Saturday nights at Jones Stadium? That happens a lot for people. Jones Stadium on a Saturday night is very rarely friendly to visiting teams, which is not to say that you can't go in there and win. There's just not a lot of them that are easy. Over under on this game is 66. At first glance, I was like, man, that seems kind of low. Oregon's number 2 in scoring, 51 points per game. They're only giving up 11 points per game defensively. Washington's number 3 in scoring with 46 points per game, and they're only giving up 18 points per game. So offensively and defensively, both of these teams are really, really ranked highly in the country. I just got to wonder, though, if a lot of it has to do with that schedule that they play to this point in the season. Prediction time, I think this is going to be a shootout. I think the defensive numbers are skewed just a little bit by the opponents they've played. I think Oregon is more balanced offensively. They run the ball well. They pass the ball well. Washington is an absolute juggernaut in the passing game, but they don't run the ball very well. I like the over in this one, and I like Oregon to get it done on the road, 41-34. So upset fashion for Oregon. Second game, number 10 at USC on the road at number 21 Notre Dame. This one kicks at 6:30 Central Time on NBC. Notre Dame's a 3-point favorite in this game, folks, which is a little surprising. USC is looking to stay perfect. Offensively, USC is absolutely phenomenal. Caleb Williams is probably one of the best quarterbacks college football has ever seen. And I sincerely mean that. What that guy can do on the run with the football, getting it down the field, the way he's able to extend plays and still keep his eyes down the field and just sort of manage all this chaos that's going on around him at the line of scrimmage. And folks, he's got chaos going on. Really awesome. Really great player. But man, as good as they are offensively, they are equally, if not worse, bad on defense. Just terrible. And guys, USC has played absolutely nobody. On the other side, you got Notre Dame looking to bounce back from losing 2 of their last 3 games. And really, it could have just as easily been 3. Got an amazing 4th and 16 conversion late in the game against Duke. By Sam Hartman, and that was the difference in that game. I think Notre Dame's probably better in the trenches on both sides of the ball. My prediction for this game, listen, I thought Notre Dame's early success was fool's gold, and I was right. There were so many people high on Notre Dame early for just beating the shit out of absolute nobodies. And they've struggled here in the last couple of weeks that they've played like some legitimate teams. You got Ohio State, Duke, Louisville. What about Louisville? They're pretty surprising. But I don't think USC can stop a soul. This Notre Dame team reminds me a lot of the Utah teams that have knocked USC off the last couple years in the Pac-12 championship. I think Notre Dame wins this game at home 34-31. And by the way, folks, we are an even 9-9 on the season in these Trace Otra games picks. We have not had a perfect week, and we have not had an imperfect week or a completely loss of a week. So we've been 1-3 and 2-3 an even amount of times. Number 25, Miami at number 12, North Carolina is game number 3 of the Trace Otra games for week 7. 6:30 p.m. kick Central Time on ABC. North Carolina with a 3-point edge on the line. Miami's looking to recover after one of the most boneheaded coaching moves since Coach Nickerson didn't take the safety and punt it out against Walnut Heights way back in the 80s. Wow. I mean, that could have potentially ruined Miami's season. Let's say Miami runs the table. Unbelievable. Now they're sitting there with 2 losses. Mac Brown's on the verge of having North Carolina in the top 10 for a second time as his second stint there at North Carolina. What a job Mac Brown has done at North Carolina, man. And also good for Mac Brown. Mac Brown built his reputation at North Carolina, came to Texas, did some really great things at Texas. Had your typical fall off. We talk about it all the time. And this holds true in all kinds of areas, not just coaching. Any kind of really upper management, CEO type position, the effectiveness after 10 years is just not that great. So he falls off at Texas, ends up getting fired at Texas, goes into TV for a while. North Carolina calls him back. He shows up, and man, he's got him in a good spot. North Carolina, not a traditional power in football. Both of these teams sit in the top 20 in scoring offense and scoring defense, which is really impressive. I think QB will most likely be the huge factor in determining the outcome of this game. Tyler Van Slyke holds a 20-point advantage over Drake May in QB efficiency. I just thought that was interesting. Going into this game, I would have thought Drake May would have been better there. I just can't fathom a team that lost to a 3-3 Georgia Tech team at home, taking out a Mac Brown team on the road. I just don't think it's going to happen. It's going to be rainy there. It's supposed to rain tonight. It's supposed to rain most of tomorrow. I like North Carolina to get it done 23-20 over Miami. So there's your Trace Otra game picks. We got North Carolina over Miami 23-20. We got Notre Dame at home over USC 34-31. And then I think we're going to take Oregon 41-34 over Washington. See how we do. Second half of the season coming up for Texas next week. They're enjoying a bye week right now. Hopefully they're getting healthy. Hopefully they're getting refocused, getting their minds right. I think Texas is going to be favored in every single one of their remaining games, including a Big 12 championship game if they make it, which isn't set in stone. Don't take me the wrong way. I'm not saying they are for sure making the Big 12 championship, but I think if they run the table, they'll be in the Big 12 championship game, and I expect them to be in there against Oklahoma again, and probably an undefeated Oklahoma. And if that's the case, I still think Texas will be favored in that game. The combined record of their remaining opponents is 19-15, 56%. They got the Houston Cougars next weekend, who are coming off a really big win last night. They got wins against UTSA, Sam Houston State, and West Virginia. Before last night, they had not beat a Power 5 school, and they had losses to Rice, TCU, and Texas Tech. Offensively, Houston's rushing for 132 yards, and these are statistics before the game last night, so I don't know exactly where they'll land on this, but as of yesterday, before their game yesterday, Houston was rushing the ball for 132 yards per game, passing for 281 yards per game, 27 points per game scoring offensively. On defense, giving up 163 yards per game on the ground. I think that's going to be a problem for them against Texas. Giving up 242 yards per game through the air. I think that's going to be a problem for them against Texas. Giving up 29 points per game defensively. I think that's going to be a problem for them against Texas. Speaking of problems, Donovan Smith scares the absolute hell out of me. He beat Texas at Texas Tech last season. He's got a lot of ability, not just throwing the ball, but he's got a lot of ability running the ball. We saw Texas struggle against Oklahoma in the QB run game. Flip side of that, we saw Texas be really, really good against Alabama in the QB run game, although I think Alabama is probably kicking themselves, especially after watching what Dylan Gabriel did to Texas last Saturday. But the other thing about Donovan Smith is, the running is potent, but he can get hot on you. He got hot last night. He didn't start out very well last night against West Virginia, but he got hot. Completed 16 passes in a row in the second half of that game. Phenomenal performance. I think for Texas, we talk about it all the time, be the storm. It's going to be very important for Texas to be the storm early against Houston, down in Houston, next Saturday. Next up, you got the BYU Cougars. They're currently 4-1. Wins against Sam Houston, Southern Utah, Arkansas, and Cincinnati. Their only loss was to Kansas. And I think that was kind of I wouldn't say a fluke necessarily, but they gave up 2 defensive touchdowns in that game. You just don't see that a lot. I don't, you can't call it a fluke because it happened. It's not like 100-mile-an-hour wind blew at the last second when they were kicking a field goal. That would be a fluke. You see turnovers for touchdowns a lot, but you don't see it twice in one game all that much. Offensively, BYU is only rushing the ball 62 yards per game, and I had a double take at that. I still don't know if I believe that. Passing the ball 255 yards per game, and somehow they got 31 points per game. I mean, they're averaging just over 300 yards per game offensively, but they've got 31 points per game scoring average. Defensively, they're giving up 152 yards per game on the ground. That could be a problem for them against Texas. Passing, they're only giving up 208 yards per game. So it looks like they got a pretty stout pass defense. And they're only giving up 22 points per game on defense, which is pretty good. Certainly not elite, but definitely not bad. During the offseason, we start breaking down the schedule. This is one of the games of concern for me. BYU's just had Texas's number here. They haven't really played recently, but the most recent times they've played in the early 2010s, BYU just absolutely ran their ass cheeks up and down Texas's face 2 years in a row. The legend of Taysom Hill was born out of that series. I don't remember the statistics, but it was bad. He ran all over Texas. BYU, I think, is a team that I think they're dangerous. I don't know if they're all that great, but they're certain. I mean, they're 4-1. Kansas State's up next, 3-2. Wins against Southeast Missouri. I think SEMO is what it said on their online schedule. I'm assuming that's Southeastern Missouri or Southeast Missouri. Troy and UCF, losses to Missouri and Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State. Wow. Offensively, they're rushing the ball for 202 yards per game. That's really good. Passing the ball for 257 yards per game. That's pretty good. Scoring 35 points per game. Defensively, they're really good at stopping the run, 93 yards per game. Passing, they're giving up 259 yards per game, and they're scoring defense 20 points per game. So they're pretty solid. Despite their record, they look pretty good statistically. And to me, a lot like BYU, K-State is just that type of team that can kind of give you fits. They're going to be tough. They're going to be disciplined. There's not a lot of stars on either one of those teams. But they're going to play hard. They're going to be tough. They're going to be disciplined. And they are completely okay with intentionally making a game just be ugly. Short and ugly. That's K-State, BYU, Iowa State. Let's make it short and ugly. Next, they go on the road to TCU, who's 3-3 today. Wins against Nicholls, Houston, and SMU. Losses to Colorado, West Virginia, and Iowa State. Gross. Offensively, they're rushing for 192 yards per game, passing for 280 yards per game, scoring 31 points per game. Defensively, their rushing average is 126 yards per game. They're giving up 241 yards per game through the air, and opponents are scoring 22 points a game against TCU. They have completely fallen off the map since going to that national championship game last year. And I called this. I thought, we talked all down the stretch last year about how they deserve to be where they were at. And there's a difference between deserve and really being that good. Does that make sense? They did they won games, which means they deserve to be there, but they won games in such crazy manners. You talk about 2 turnovers for scores in a game. They got 2 pick sixes against Michigan, and that was the difference in that game against Michigan last year in the semis. Chandler Morris, it looks like he might be out with a knee injury. I don't know for how long. I've seen commentary that he was probably done for the season. I've seen commentary that the knee injury may not be as serious as they thought. So they're going to kind of day-to-day him. I don't know what that means either. TCU's in a rough spot right now, but this game is on the road. And to me, the question is, kind of the question we always have. Can Texas be focused and play for 4 freaking quarters? We haven't seen that at all this year out of Texas. The closest thing we got to Texas playing 4 quarters was the Baylor game. And that was the only game they came out and just were hot as hell right from the beginning on both sides of the ball. So again, I think the key for Texas, one of the keys for Texas is, can you play to your potential for 4 quarters instead of coming into these games, dicking around, playing down to the level of your competition, and then at some point turning it on and winning the game? Freaking gnat. Sorry. After that, they go to Iowa State in Ames, who's 3-3 right now with wins over University of Northern Iowa, Oklahoma State, and TCU. Losses to Iowa, Ohio, and Oklahoma. They're running the ball for 116 yards per game, passing the ball for 206 yards per game, scoring 21 points per game. So offensively, they're pretty anemic. Defensively, they're giving up 133 yards per game on the ground, 214 yards per game through the air, and 21 points per game defensively. Interesting that their scoring and their scoring offense and scoring defense are exactly the same. And I round on these, and I usually just round down. Doesn't matter where it falls, round down. So they're probably not exactly. The 5-star culture in Ames isn't getting it done, folks. And probably that's because half of that 5-star culture got kicked off the team or ruled ineligible or suspended or whatever it was for gambling. This game's on the road, and Matt Campbell hates him some Texas, though. They'll be ready to play. Despite the fact that Texas is not currently undefeated and ranked very highly, all of these schools are going to be ready to play Texas and would love nothing more than to be the team that knocks Texas off one more time and probably keeps them out of the Big 12 championship game. Texas wraps it up at home with Texas Tech, who's currently 3-3. Wins versus Tarleton State, Houston, and Baylor. Losses to Wyoming, Oregon, and West Virginia. Offensively, they're running the ball 178 yards per game, which is something you just don't see a lot or haven't seen a lot out of Texas Tech. I think they've really made it a point to rush the ball this year, and they got a good back. They're passing the ball 219 yards per game, scoring 34 points per game. Defensively, they're only giving up 126 yards per game on the ground, 244 yards per game through the air, and 23 points per game given up scoring defensively. This was a game before the season started that we had circled, and we thought it might be the type of game that could decide which one of these teams goes to play for the Big 12 championship. Lots of people were really high on Tech coming into 2023. They had a great season for Tech last year. People don't realize this. They were 8-5 last year. That is the 13th best season Texas Tech has ever had. So far, it's not looking like this game is going to end up being that type of game. It certainly could. They currently only have one conference loss, and their schedule isn't all that rough from here on out. Texas fares better at home against Texas Tech than they do on the road, certainly. You look at most of their losses to Texas Tech, they've come out in Jones Stadium in Lubbock, Texas. Most of the time, the games in Austin aren't even good games. Random college football thoughts. Well, let me back up. So there's the remaining schedule for Texas, with just some random thoughts about those teams. Texas has got themselves in a position by losing that game that they really, who knows what's going to happen. I still think there's a lot of room for a lot of these teams in the Big 12 to lose multiple games. Texas is still right now, even with that Houston win against West Virginia, they're still in a position where they don't totally 100% control their own destiny. Texas pretty much, I feel like if they want to feel comfortable about playing in the Big 12 championship game, they need to run this table. If they want to be in a playoff at the end of the year, which I think that's still a possibility. To do it, they're going to have to run the table. They're going to have to beat Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game, and they're going to have to win those 6-7 games really convincingly. They do have the win over Alabama, which is turning out to look a lot better so far than most people thought at the time. So that's a resume builder. The goal for Texas needs to be quit fucking around and drop the hammer on everybody you play the rest of the season. So we'll see if they can get it done. Random college football thoughts. West Virginia at Houston. What a hell of a game that was. What a finish. I don't give a shit between West Virginia and Houston who won that game. Obviously, West Virginia was an undefeated team in the Big 12, so them going down is helpful to Texas at this point. But I really didn't care. Houston builds this pretty decent, 10-point, I think, second half lead late. West Virginia West Virginia scores a touchdown. Gets them within, I don't know. I can't even remember. Gets them to the point where if they scored another touchdown, I think it was 3. I think it was 3. They scored a touchdown, got a 2-point conversion. That brought them within 3 points. And then they got the ball back, and I don't remember how much time they had. It wasn't a ton, a little over 2 minutes maybe. Get the ball back in the fourth quarter. Moving down the field pretty good, and then Houston defense stiffens up, forces a 4th and 10. West Virginia throws a 50-yard touchdown with 12 seconds left on the clock on 4th and 10 to take a lead. Mountaineer Baker Mayfield gets a penalty for taking his helmet off and acting like a jackass, just like Baker Mayfield always acted like a jackass anytime he scored a touchdown. It's never happened before for him. And that was a big problem. Then Mountaineer Baker Mayfield goes over to the sideline and starts waving goodbye to the Houston Cougar fans in the stands. There wasn't a lot, but the ones he could find, he's waving at them, telling them bye, chest bumping, just acting like a complete douchebag on the sideline. I don't call him Mountaineer Baker Mayfield for no reason, folks. So Houston gets the ball with 12 seconds left, and because of the penalty, I don't know exactly where they got the ball, but it was pretty far up the field. Way out past the 35-yard line, I think. Houston completes a quick pass, gets the ball to the West Virginia 49-yard line. And then the last play of the game is a 49-yard Hail Mary. And, man, Houston played it. Houston played it great, man. That kid, I think he's a transfer from USC, got up, elevated himself, fought off all the defensive backs that were also jumping for the ball, got it tipped, and one of the other Houston wide receivers was standing right there to grab it. And I'm not sure, it was really close, but I'm not sure he was in the end zone when he caught that ball. But he quickly got into the end zone. Crowd goes crazy. Everybody's losing their freaking mind. What a hell of an effort on that Hail Mary. Because generally you're looking at multiple defensive backs against at most 3 wide receivers. If you send all your eligible receivers that direction, you bring way too many people over there, and it just makes it a big mess. So what you're trying to do is get your 3 guys, probably at worst, maybe at best against 4 of their guys. And it's just about going up and making a play on the ball and keeping it alive. And that's what they did. And, man, I love those types of plays. I thought to do that in that type of a situation because, you saw the Houston sideline. Dana Holgorsen, he was so mad he couldn't even be mad. I think that's the first time I've ever seen Dana Holgorsen where you knew he was mad and upset, but he didn't chunk shit and his face wasn't red and the veins weren't sticking out of his neck. He was just so pissed off, so upset, so disappointed that he couldn't even be mad. And then to turn around and do what they did in 2 plays with 12 seconds on the clock. Phenomenal. I'm about it, man. I thought that was awesome. And it was just really cool to see Mountaineer Baker Mayfield kind of sulking on the sidelines. At that point, before that play, West Virginia controlled their own destiny, and they just blew it on the road against, not a great Houston team. Let's just be honest. Let's hope Texas doesn't do the same thing next weekend. Got to show up, got to be ready to play. So because of that Hail Mary last night, it prompted me to go back and watch the Hail Mary at the end of the Red River Shootout. And I know that is masochistic, but I had to know something, because I felt like when I watched that live, and I felt like when I watched the replay, I didn't see a lot of effort out of the Texas wide receivers. And so I wanted to go back and verify. And here's what I found. And it's infuriating, and it's got to be something that Sark has to work on. Not a single Texas player jumped for that ball in the end zone. And at least 2, probably 3 Oklahoma defensive backs were all off the ground, all fighting for the ball. You got Adonai Mitchell, who's the 6'3", 200-pounder, the big guy, the guy that should be able to go up and jump up for balls. He acted like he didn't even try. He just completely let Oklahoma box him out. And then you got Jordan Whittington that just kind of stood there. And man, I don't know that Jordan Whittington is that much of a jumper. I don't know that he's not either. And then you had JT Sanders, who just kind of barely looked interested. He was late to the party. I don't know, man. Go watch the Houston game. Watch the end of that game. Watch their Hail Mary, and then go watch the Texas Hail Mary. Just a complete lack of effort. So now I'm pissed off again, and I'm pissed off on Prediction Friday. I'm pissed off on Team Am Friday. The odds of getting a Hail Mary aren't that great, but you know what? They're absolutely zero if you put absolutely no effort into trying to make a play. When's the last time you saw him ever call a penalty on a Hail Mary? It's like a mosh pit, dude. Go in there and fuck somebody up, throw people out of the way, and make a play on the ball. Disappointing. Not 100% surprising, but definitely disappointed. We'll be back on Exaggeration Monday, and that'll be Monday. I'm trying to get Nash Talks Texas to join us. We'll just have some dialogue on midseason Texas, where we're at. I'm going to talk. I would like to talk about, how Coach Sark's doing. We're halfway through year 3. Where do we feel like he's at? Do we feel like he's behind? Do we feel like he's ahead? We'll have some random college football thoughts as well, and we'll probably find something else to talk about regarding Texas. Check out the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. Check us out on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Horn Takes. Follow and subscribe, please. Won't cost you guys a thing. Could help me out. Email at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your questions, comments, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. You guys have a good weekend and get hooked.